Educate, entertain, enjoy.
You're listening to Aspen Waite Radio.
You are listening to Aspen Waite Radio, and it's the Monday live breakfast show with Paul Waite and my special guest, Mr. Sandro Forte. That's a special joke for me because Forte in Italian means loud, doesn't it, Sandro?
It also means strong as well. I think I'd prefer to stick with strong if you don't mind, Paul.
Yeah, I think strong translates as generoso or something, or I don't know. You'd know. What's the word?
Yeah, yes, but it has musical. If we're following the musical connotation, then yeah. But I can be loud as well.
I liked the idea of you being Mr. Loud, you see. So I should have said buongiorno, Sandro. Buongiorno. So this is genuine. Italy is my favourite country other than England. And I have been to Italy about 20 times. And I do like saying things like il conto per favore, per piacere, senza acqua da mangiare, gelato.
Paul, I bet you never get the bill after a meal.
That's such a rude thing to say because I'm very generous.
I know you are. Joking.
Anyway, so just for the so who is Sandro Forte? Sandro Forte is Sandro Forte is, in my opinion, the best financial advisor in the country, and I don't want him to get big-headed any more than he might already be, or whatever, because he gets so much praise. Sandro would be one of the few people that I was saying actually when I was speaking last week, Sandro, that you'd be one of the few people that I would consider to be at least an equal, if not more so, and very like-minded. And probably someone I have immense respect for and would like to know better rather than the other way around, which is one of the good things. Sandro's like a beautiful woman. He sort of gives you a little bit of himself, so you just want a little bit more, I think. That's what he does. He's like the will-o'-the-wisp. He dips in and out. Every now and again you get to talk to him and you remember what a lovely little chap he is, and then away he goes. Anyway, so I've just been doing a lot of research on Sandro, so... the Forte ancestral home was a small village between Naples and Rome. It's now called Montforte. And do you ever go back there?
Do you know what, Paul? It's funny. You're absolutely right. Your research is correct. It's a very small village. It's called Montforte because pretty much everyone who lives there is now a Forte. And yes, I've been a few times and planning to go back next year with a few members of my family, a few of my siblings, actually.
So the Fortes are very good at breeding, obviously.
They are. And I it's very kind of you to say what you just said, but let me probably describe myself in a single sentence. My grandmother and grandfather were both Fortes when they married. Because my family is so enormous. They were very, very, very distantly related. I mean, you can never find them on a family tree. But yes, they were both Fortes when they married, which does go a long way to explaining why I turned out like I did.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that. I think I was just going to say, one of the things I was going to say before we started being serious for a bit is this is a man who invited me to talk at an event that Fortes organised with Octopus Investments. Do you remember that?
I do.
Can't remember exactly where in London it was, Holborn maybe or something like that.
It was.
So very kindly asked me to speak. And then there's probably 40 people in the room. Sorry, that wasn't meant to be a pun, by the way. I meant the number. I should have said 39, shouldn't I, or something? Anyway, so when it came to my turn to speak, Mr. Forte, my friend, stands up in front of the audience and says, basically, you've got this chap talking to you now who's not like anybody else. I won't tell you where he comes from, donkey, because it'll be very obvious where he comes from, And I said, thanks a lot, mate, didn't I? Do you remember that?
I don't remember saying it quite like that, Paul.
Yeah, but, you did, yeah. Yeah, I was actually going to ask you whether you sponsored a donkey on Western Beach.
No, but my sister, Nikki, is married to the family who own the donkeys on the beach. So indirectly we do. And as by way of an apology, I will make sure that one of the donkeys is named after you from now on, Paul. About that.
Well, I can't tell you, when I was a small child, the highlight of my life was getting to ride a donkey on Western Beach on a Sunday. Seriously, I really, really love the donkeys. So let's not go on waste too much time. Just out of interest, the Forte ice cream parlour in Burnham-on-Sea, is that one of your family's venues. Still today, or was?
Is Cheddar, Weston-super-Mare, as was. So my late father, he passed away when I was 9. He ran the ice cream parlours in Weston-super-Mare, Clevedon, all over the place, as far down as Swanage, North Devon. So pretty much wherever you could find an ice cream with the name Forte attached to it was probably directly or indirectly related to me, yeah.
So apart from the fact that several small villages in Italy are full of Fortes, and they're interbreeding, like I can't say. Be careful what I say here. The has to say the pedigree of the Forte family is rather impressive. Especially, obviously can't go back into antiquities. So I believe that your grandparents were interned, or the paternal ones were interned in prisoner war camps in the Second World War. And like many, in fact, my best friend at secondary school was a guy called Nicholas Tapazio. His father was called Libero Tapazio. He could barely speak English after 30-odd years. So your grandfather was cousins with Lord Charles Forte, who was the father of Rocco Forte, who, of course, created the international prestigious hotel chain. And of course, your second cousin, I think, is Alex Plitzi. Is that right?
She is. She's in, and I say this in the loveliest way, Paul. She's mad as a box of frogs, but she's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, she's got an incredible name, isn't she? Something like Contessa di something or something.
There's a few titles actually within the family. I didn't get one of those, but there are a few titles.
So, joking apart for a minute. So I've actually learned quite a lot of Sandro. I knew what Sandro was like as a person in terms of sort of what was inside him, if you like, because that's very obvious when you deal with him. I hadn't appreciated his full life story, so I won't say anything in case he doesn't want me to say it. So this is a man who was known affluence as a young child, wanted for nothing, loving family environment, beautiful house in Lower Bristol Road in Bath. And father quite a lot older than your mother, and your father sadly died of lung cancer, I think, when you were a small boy, as you alluded to. This is the bit I'd love to talk to you about, but as I haven't, I should have done more research, so we won't talk about it today. And because of a family settlement or an agreement, the family business, which was obviously doing very well, passed to one of your aunties and left your mother in quite a poor situation, and you went from rags to riches to rags. Ended up living in Weston-super-Mare. Well, that's bad enough in itself. In welfare housing, I think. There's a story about you finding 150 rats in a room. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah, you're right. Actually, the house in Lower Bristol Road was actually in Weston, so I was born in Weston.
Oh, was it?
Grew up in Weston. And that's absolutely right. Your research is pretty good, very good actually. So my dad was 50, just turning 50 years old, diagnosed with lung cancer, fought a very long battle against the disease. I was 9, eldest of 4 children. My mum was 27 at the time of his diagnosis. Within 2 years, he'd passed away. My mum, 29, widow of 4 kids, never worked, and the set of circumstances, Paul, was not really untypical. We see this happen all around the place. And ultimately what happened, the problem that existed was that I guess people had this preconception that my dad, Leo, was very successful and therefore, didn't need a financial plan, for example. The problem was that my mum had never worked in the business. She didn't know the business. So it naturally passed to my late father's sister. And although I worked in the business between the ages of 13 and 18 before I went to university to help my mum out, she was declared bankrupt and we ended up in council house. So the rat story was when we were in said council house, there was some activity at night. We opened an airing cupboard door and it was like the Pied Piper. It was quite the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life. Yeah.
Oh, I hate rats in itself. So how did you cope with that? That massive trauma and, going from being so sort of comfortably off to suddenly being quite poor. And, did you cope with that well? Do you think it helped shape who you are?
I don't know that I cope with it very well. I don't think any of us did, really. And that's being brutally honest about it. I don't think that really manifested itself for me until much later in my life. But I remember when I was 9 years old and my mum came to my school, Corpus Christi at the time, and I was doing a school assembly, and I was called into the headmaster's office and told that my father had passed away. And we didn't really know that he was ill, because they were very careful to keep it from us at the time. And I remember my mum saying to me, "You're the man of the house now." And one of the things I remember, Paul, is being kind of overwhelmed with this sense of importance, that I was going to be the person that was charged with the responsibility of bringing up my siblings. But at the same time, subconsciously, it was a real burden. So I've spent all of my life, I guess, because of that instruction, that's the right expression, going out of my way to support my family. And everything I've done since, interestingly, has always been about helping other people, whether it's the philanthropic stuff, the writing of the book, the speaking, and now the wealth management, which happened completely by accident. But it's interesting that subconsciously, I guess I followed a path that was very much linked to that experience when I was 9 years old.
And before we get into the first of your cheesy songs today, how long did it take your mother to find Love Again with Dave?
Well, hang on a minute. You just played Supertramp, who are a fantastic band. I can't think that my choices are cheesy, but we'll let the listeners decide. My mum met. He became my best friend, Paul. He was the loveliest man, apart from my dad, of course. But his name was Dave. Worked for Westlands Helicopters, for those who can remember that.
I do know, yeah.
He was very into drama, amateur dramatics. So they married when I was about 30. I was just turning 13 from memory.
Oh, okay, so quite soon then.
About 4 years.
Yeah, it's rather wonderful, that I think it's probably not normal that somebody in your position, I think it probably would be expected that someone in your position, when your father left you so young and then your mother found love again, might almost be at odds with the stepfather. So it's rather beautiful that Dave became your best friend, and obviously a tremendous influence on you. And I think he himself died of stomach cancer, didn't he? Which is very sad. Anyway, so I think we talked about it a little bit longer than I'd wanted for the first break, but I think it's important to sort of get to that part of your life story. So your first song today is "Why" by Bronski Beat. So what does this mean to you, other than probably wearing white trousers and dancing around some nightclub in the Weston-super-Mare?
Well, Paul, I'm an open book, very transparent, and I'm going to make a confession to you that not even you know. But obviously, why 1982, the early part of the 80s was very influential on my life. Loved that part of my life and the whole era, and music in particular. And I could actually hit the notes on this particular song when I was 14 years of age.
Oh, well, I think take it away, Drew, and leave Sandro with his shame. Spent the whole time listening to that track thinking about Sandro in his tight white trousers singing those notes. But what an awful thought. Anyway, so little Sandro Forte did quite well at school, got his A-levels and O-levels, went off to university, degree in English, which probably explains why you can write. One of the more literate people I know, I have to say. Very interesting. So there's quite a lot of available material on the World Wide Web about you. So there's a very interesting quote from yourself that you took a long time to get anywhere. Why was that?
Well, I think like so many people, Paul, and it is a bit of a worry that there's so much available on the internet about me, but I need to do something about that. But
not your love life, though, unfortunately. I was digging for the facts,
Less said about that, the better. I think, like so many people, I think it did take me a while to find the direction I wanted to go in life. I wanted to be a policeman and a fireman, and I longed to be a surgeon. That's what I wanted to do. Okay. But my physics was terrible at school because I didn't like the teacher. And the influence of Dave actually was really pivotal, because when I was 18 and pursued my university degree, I also got quite heavily involved in drama because of the influence of Dave, and did a drama degree in Birmingham. And that was really what shaped my the rest of my life, really, because when I left drama school, having decided I wasn't going to be a very successful actor, though I loved it, I started working for a family friend in financial services for the sole purposes of paying off my student overdraft at the time. And that was the moment I discovered my calling in life, I think. So it was completely by accident. I had no aspirations to go into the financial services world. But the 2-3 years I spent with my first boss taught me all the things I didn't want to be in business. So it was a kind of a reverse psychology, and that's what shaped the business that I have today.
You mean because of the way he operated in business, or just experience? Yeah. So it can be quite useful sometimes, can't it? So what is it that you? So when you were a young man, what is it about being a financial advisor that really appeals to you?
Well, at the time I didn't know it, but I mean, since I started my own business, which was the year I got married, had twin children, bought my first house. I mean, talk about making a commitment. I just went all in. Again, going back to that conversation that I had with my mum in the headmaster's office when I was 9, I think there is this part of me, howsoever that's been shaped, that is very much about trying to help people achieve greater success for themselves in life, whether that's some of the coaching I give or the book that I've written or raising money for charitable causes. The financial planning side of it, Paul, as you know, my starting point is always to help people, to empower people. That's a good expression, to empower people to have the means. And what I mean by that is to understand what it is they're doing that helps them to become financially more successful. You were very kind recently to introduce one of your lovely clients. And the first thing I said to them was, my job primarily is to educate you. And I don't say that in a patronizing way, but to educate you so you are empowered to make your own decisions. And then what follows from that is if we decide to work together, then I'm the vehicle through which you can put all of those things into practice. But what I'm not is somebody just pitches up, tries to flog your product, tells you what you need to do. And then 3 years later, you're scratching your head wondering why you've done it all. Because that's unfortunately what happens in my world. But as you know, Paul, and you've done this so successfully in your own business, the failings of our competitors create our opportunity.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, well, one of the reasons for obviously having interviews with great people like yourself, and as you may know, I do a live show on a Friday where I have many chief executives listening to me. Is obviously to pass on tips to other people, and I think one of the most important things with a business owner is to have great advisors, but more importantly than that, not just to have great advisors, but to actually be advised. And I know as an advisor myself, I get very upset, shall we say, frustrated, if I'm trying to look after someone and then it becomes disjointed, or, you get the clients that sort of go down the pub and ask everyone for their opinion, that sort of thing. So, what do you think about that? And I guess, sorry, and I'll ask you another question as well. So, what would you say was the hardest thing about starting a business? What was not natural to your personality?
Well, I think because of my experience, Paul, it was risk. When you start a business, and I speak to thousands of people, have done over the years, and one of the reasons for apathy, one of the reasons why people don't seem to be able to get out the starting blocks, is because they worry about loss and pain and risk. And I hear people making all kinds of excuses as to why they shouldn't do something. So in those first 2 or 3 years, my natural tendency was to avoid risk so that we didn't end up in the same situation my family had found itself all those years ago. That was the hardest thing. And, none of us woke up one day, born to run a business or born leaders. You kind of work it out as you go along, and you make lots of mistakes along the way. And we're still learning, of course. But I think the biggest thing was that sense of loss that comes from the risks that you take when you throw open your own doors. You've been there, I've been there. Lots of successful people have. But what I've learned is the people who are most successful in business, generally the ones who are more open to taking on that pain, to accepting that with pain comes loss. But somebody, a lovely guy called Max Moyo, he's a South African speaker, and he taught me many years ago that if you are not prepared to accept pain, then by definition, you are not prepared to accept growth. You cannot grow without pain. And that's the hardest thing to do, is to accept that it's going to be painful. Like going to the gym is painful, but you've got to be prepared to pay the price, Paul, as you know. So that was the hardest thing, is psychologically getting over that obstacle of, this is going to hurt a little bit, probably a lot at times, but it's something that if you are really serious about success, it's something you have to do.
How did you get your first break as a speaker, and how did that happen?
I got my first break as a speaker, Paul, because I was complaining about the other speaker I was listening to at the time.
Oh, brilliant! That's good.
And what was happening in my world, again, I don't want to knock financial advisors generally, because there's lots of good ones out there. There's dozens of not very good ones, but I was attending what used to be called the Life Insurance Association meeting in Bristol, actually at Lee Court, all those years ago. And I heard this speaker, I won't mention his name, but I think he's still around. And he was talking like the stuff that he was sharing with people was still relevant. And it was clear that the stuff he was sharing was still stuck in a kind of 1970s time warp. And I just thought, as a young man, 21, 22 at the time, I thought, hang on a minute, this stuff clearly doesn't work. And I didn't complain about him, but I was kind of moaning about the fact that I wasn't going to go to another one of these meetings because they weren't very meaningful. I wasn't getting any value. And somebody said to me, well, hang on a minute, you're just in the process of starting your business. You've become quite successful quite quickly. Why don't you, and you've gone to drama school, so you should be able to stand in front of a group of people. Why don't you share your ideas? And that was like a red rag to a bull to me. So I've cobbled together this presentation, and within a year, I'd spoken at 24 of the regions around the country. Then I spoke at the national meeting the following year, and then got invited to a worldwide conference in front of about 8,500 people, and that was it. It all took off.
Fabulous. So a little teaser of the great life that Sandro had to come, and now I know Drew's very happy to be playing Rio.
Paul Waite.
I had visions of Sandro on his super yacht sailing through the Caribbean with the wind blowing into his sun-kissed hair. Oh, lovely. One of the things I have to say, Sandro, which is really nice, I was saying to Drew about one of the reasons why it's so easy for me to sit down with you. And I don't think, to be fair, that you and I would, if people looked at us, that they would necessarily think that we were that similar. But one of the things that always strikes me about you is, apart from the fact that you're like in my head all the time, you keep stealing my ideas and saying things that I would say. We were having a bit of a laugh about the fact that you started speaking when you were 21, but you felt that you'd taken a long time to get anywhere, which I think is the mark of a great man, really.
Well, yeah, 21 is still, I don't know. I think I've always had my feet very firmly kept on the ground by my mum, who's just the most wonderful person in the world. And yeah, I think that I've always aspired to, do more for people, be better in whatever way I can be. And it would be fair to say, just to put this into perspective, Paul, that the first couple of years of my career were terrible, abject. because what I did is I did the thing that my then boss in Western-super-Mare was telling me to do, which is really kind of follow that transactional, traditional model in a business. And I didn't believe in it. And I kind of put off, for example, I looked at my stepfather, Dave, who was the breadwinner in the family, and every logical fiber of my being said to me, this is somebody you need to have a conversation with to make sure that there is a financial plan in place should he, as the breadwinner, pass away like my dad did. And I didn't do anything about it for 2 years, because 21 years of age, golf was more attractive. Having fun with my mates was a better option. And I just spent 2 years doing what most people do, which is procrastinate. So that's why I say I spent a long time getting nowhere. Okay. Those 2 years, I did what so many of us unfortunately do, which is just made a whole bunch of excuses. Okay.
So you made up for it since. So you've taken the Forte philosophy to 83 countries, which is staggering. How would you sum up the Forte philosophy?
That's a great question, actually. A lot of people kind of skirt around the edges, but have never asked me this question directly. One thing I always remember about Great Uncle Charlie and Rocco, who I've worked very closely with for a number of years, Alex, her mother Olga, my father, my grandfather, my uncle Dominic. Anybody that knows Weston-super-Mare and ever went for an ice cream there will have come across one of those people.
Yeah.
And I guess the philosophy is very much, and this is very old-fashioned. The thing I love about you, Paul, and can I take this opportunity to commend you on your brilliance as a DJ, as a radio presenter? I mean, bear in mind, and I say this with great sincerity, bear in mind, you didn't have any formal training, and I do know a number of DJs. You do as good a job, I have to say, very, very, very good. And I know this will resonate with you because you're quite old-fashioned like me, and I say old-fashioned in the nicest sense. Great Uncle Charlie used to say, your handshake is worth a 500-page contract. You do not need contracts in business if you're honorable. So I was always brought up to, hold doors open for ladies and stand when they left the table and shake somebody by the hand and look them in the eye. And if I promised somebody I would do something, I would always do it. And I think that's a philosophy that, okay, I think when you adopt that approach, you are going to get turned over from time to time. But the people you do the deals with, the people you build relationships with are really genuine, long-term, and I think commercially much more advantageous in the long term.
I just purring like a little Cheshire cat there, listening to you. I feel so full of love, like I've been eating ready brek for the last 2 minutes. This is beautiful. So you've been all around the world, so tell us a bit about this. It says it's true, top conference speaker in 5 continents. Is that right?
I have no idea how, but yes, that's true. And over 80 different speaking awards, certified speaking professional, global speaking fellow, and a fellow of the Professional Speakers Association in the UK. I think there's only about a handful of people that have got all 3 designations. But I honestly don't know, Paul, how that's ever happened, apart from the fact that I have taken various messages to different parts of the world, as you say. And for some reason, lots of people seem to like what I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I discovered so I've been talking. Well, I've been talking most of my life, actually. My dad would say for too long, but I was actually trained to be a proper speaker lecturer when I was 25, and then sort of intermittently used those skills. And it's only really been in the last 5 years when I've had a few people that have believed in me, where I've suddenly been let loose on the world, The thing that I found as a speaker, and this was actually very true of the Octopus Investments thing. I don't know if you remember this. I probably had 7 people in the audience almost jumped on me straight after my talk, and I think people find people like you and me refreshing. You sort of just say it as it is. This is me. I'm Sandro. I don't really care if you like me. I'd like it if you did, but I'm Sandro, and actually, that's not very good over there. Well, you might, if you think it's good, that's fine. You go and do it, but I'm telling you not to do it. And I think people actually, one of the things I've found, which has been quite rewarding actually, is that a lot of people out there do respond very well to, what I would call old-fashioned values. And it's funny you talking about, I thought it was a wonderful thing about the handshake. One of the things I do quite often when I'm seeing a client, especially the first time, I'll hold my hand out and I say, I'm one of the few people left, and if you shake my hand, it means something. So I think it's not a surprise to me that that you've been so successful. I think what is more amazing is that you're incredibly understated about that, which I think is a good thing, by the way. There's no sort of air of, look at me, I'm a clever so-and-so, is there at all? You're quite a humble man. Why do you think that is?
Because my mum had slapped me around the back of the leg if I was anything else, Paul. I have to say the family's always been very grounded. And I think that, you only have to look around to kind of have your own perspective of life. There are many people that have achieved some extraordinary things. I run a podcast, for example, and when you talk to people like an 18-year-old Kean Saville, who's probably my favorite podcast guest of the lot, actually, no disrespect to anyone else, He suffers from a condition called neurofibromatosis, which is basically a very, very rare condition where cancerous tumors grow throughout your central nervous system. And he's got an inoperable brain tumor, tumors on his spine. He's blind in one eye, deaf in one ear. And yet his view of life, Paul, is so incredibly positive. And when you come off 30 minutes talking to him, it's very difficult to be anything other than very humble and very grounded, because you only have to look around you to get some kind of perspective of life. So yeah, apart from my mum giving me a clip around the ear, I think I'm very lucky because I've been to lots of different places. When you go to a place like Mumbai and you're taken to a 5-star hotel, but you drive past abject poverty, it's very difficult to be anything other than pretty grounded, I guess.
Fabulous. There's so many things we could talk about, and I think if you'll have us, I think having you back as a repeat guest would be fantastic. So I'd like to talk about your book. Did you ever feel you had a book in you? How did you prepare for writing your first book? Was there a failed experiment first? How did it happen?
It took about 3 years, 2.5 years, making various excuses and thinking, oh gosh, I've got to try and write a few more pages of this book. And I then discovered that actually, if I just made loads and loads of notes, because that's what started this idea, loads and loads of notes, shoved them in a ring binder, and then basically highlighted the paragraphs and kind of allocated them to chapters, and then made, like so many things in life, Paul, just made a decision to do it rather than skirt around the edges. And then it took me about 3 months to write it from start to finish. Wrote 3 or 4 pages a day, and then self-published because I didn't actually believe enough in the book to go to a publisher. And 500,000+ copies later, here we are. Quite extraordinary. But all of my book proceeds go to charity, which is half the reason why I've raised over £15 million.
So your book has been sold in 60 countries in 8 different languages, and it's called Dare to be Different. Mm-hmm. So what is the ethos of Dare to be Different? What is the message?
There's a few things. The first thing is that I think in order to be successful and success is different things to different people. So let's be clear about that. Yeah. But in order to transition, let's put it like that, from one place to another, the first thing I believe you have to have is the right mindset. You can't just wake up in the morning, listen to a motivational speaker, as I've listened to many times, and then just decide today is going to be a good day. You have to have a deeply embedded subconscious mindset, and you have to approach success mentally like you approach walking, talking, swimming, riding a bike, driving a car. And I do believe you can learn success subconsciously. So that's the first thing. And then the whole Dare to be Different thing is sometimes going back to what I said earlier, Paul, about pain, about being able to step outside your comfort zone, because that's where progress is made. So in the same way that I and you basically disrupted our marketplace by doing something that was almost the inverse of the traditional model, is difficult. So a lot of the book is about flipping things upside down and finding, and I truly believe this, on the reverse of every challenge in life, there is an opportunity. So mindset followed by the toolkit, if that's the right expression, to give people the means, both subconsciously and physically, to transition from one place to another in life.
Fabulous. It's consummate, young man. I'm still, the ready brick is still lasting here for me. So we're going to play Sandro's last track today. When I saw Round and Round, I was getting all excited about it being, you spin me right round. But instead, we've got Spandau Ballet. So take it away, Drew.
This is Full Weight on Aspen Weight Radio.
Let's trim my mic up even. Round and round it goes. So we have 10 minutes and 45 seconds left of the great Sandro Forte. I'm pleased to say, Sandro, that Drew has just bought your book. literally while we were listening to that song. So there we are.
Drew, let me say that it's no literary classic. Many people have said it's very useful to correct wonky tables and as a draft excluder.
That's right.
Well, there was only 2 copies left on Amazon, so I grabbed one of those.
Anyway, we don't have a lot of time. So something I get asked a lot, as I say, on my Friday show, where I basically have no idea whatsoever what I'm going to get asked. So I get asked about 35 to 40 live questions every week. I have been known to cry, actually. I have cried twice on my show. Because sometimes people say things to you and they people say, I remember one week I was asked about, what I would say to young Paul starting up in business. And I'd thought about the pain of the early days, and people ask you to describe it and you can't really. And I remember how lost I was and all that, and sometimes just gets a bit too much. One of the things I get asked a lot is, I'm not a great one for self-promotion. So I do quite a lot of charitable things which aren't necessarily clear and obvious to the outside world. And I get asked a lot, like, why I do that and what makes me want to do that. Why do I do all this free advice and talking to the world? What encourages you to be the philanthropist and great believer in the community that you are, do you think?
Again, a very good question. It's difficult to put my finger on it, Paul, but what I would say is that, a lot of people think that philanthropy is about giving vast amounts of money to, fundamentally change a person or a community or the world. And that's why a lot of people don't do it, because they say, well, what contribution can I possibly make that would make any kind of difference? I'll give you a good story, a very brief one there. I was walking through London. This is probably pre-pandemic, but walking through London, and there was a young lad in a doorway. I mean, the sort of thing you see a dozen times a day in London, unfortunately. And he was from Middle Eastern origins, I think. And we got the cardboard sign, homeless and hungry. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really want to just, delve into my pocket and hand him £5, because you never quite know where that money goes.
Yeah.
So I went into a well-known sandwich shop, bought him a sandwich, and I handed him the sandwich. But I spent a couple of minutes, I just kind of knelt down next to him and asked him his name and asked him where he was from. And at the end of what was only a couple of minutes, he said to me, "Thank you for noticing me today." And that really resonated with me, because I think when it comes to philanthropy, as you know, Paul, it isn't about the vast swathes of money. Sometimes it is just about noticing another human being, or, let's take the Samaritans as an example. These are people who give of their time to help another human being. And if everyone's legacy could be that they've just helped one other human being in some way, I think that's an amazing legacy to leave. I'm very fortunate that I have, built playgrounds, and I have built wells, and sat on boards of charitable organizations and seen massive change in individuals and communities. So, it's just philanthropy at a basic level, but on a much larger scale for me personally. But I think we can all do our thing. And I can give you loads of examples throughout history that if we had just done something, we would have made future generations' lives so much easier. So I think we've all got a duty to help somebody else in life in some way, whether it's in business, whether it's somebody who's struggling, or just noticing somebody in the street saying good morning. I know that, again, that's very old fashioned. We don't do that anymore. But, just leaving a smile on somebody's face is a kind of nice thing to do.
Yeah, and I think your point about if every person helped just one other person. One of the things I do a lot, actually, I've been doing right probably from the early days, maybe even in my 20s. I've always been the sort of person that did a lot of coaching, mentoring, training, so I can make someone run faster, cycle faster, play rugby better, box better, talk better, or whatever, And often, that person I've helped has said to me, what do you want out of this or something, and I just say, promise me, when you can, you do this for somebody else. That's one of my things,
Well, one of my really good friends, actually, I met in Starbucks, going back for probably 4 or 5 years. And he's an orchestra conductor based in the Southwest. Lovely, lovely man. And I was stood in the queue, minding my own business, waiting to order a cup of coffee. And as he was ordering his, because he was directly in front of me in the queue, he turned to me and said, "Can I buy your coffee?" Now, as we all know, if some stranger turns around,
did he fancy you or something?
but the thing is, if you suddenly get that, it's not the norm. So your instinct is to kind of take a step back metaphorically and go, hang on a minute, what does the guy want? And he said to me, genuinely, what would you like? I said, okay, thank you, Black Americano. And we got talking, and I said, do you mind me asking why you've just randomly asked me if I want a coffee? He said, many years ago, somebody did exactly the same thing to me, random act of kindness. And asked me only to promise to pay that forward to somebody else in the future. And he said, all I'm doing is keeping that promise. And I've done that probably 3-4 dozen times since, just whenever I feel like it, turn to the person behind me in a queue and just say, can I buy you a coffee? And it's amazing what happens to that person, because they walk out of wherever it is, maybe a Starbucks or what have you. And, for £3, £3.50, you've transformed their day, because they always walk out with a smile on their face. They are a bit puzzled as to why you've done it. But when you tell them the backstory, I think it does, just even if for a moment, it does definitely change their outlook on the day. And that's the kind of legacy I think we need to think about creating for other people.
So you're on the board of 2 charities. Are these charities that you are influential in, you helped to set up, or are they ones where you've been asked to add value, so to speak?
One is the newest job I've got, and I've served on several. I have my own charitable foundation as well. But the newest one is a lovely company called Tangled Feet. They are performing arts charity where they go around schools, universities, open air theatres, and basically take all kinds of educational programs to and performances to lots of different people. Some of the stuff they do is incredible. And then the other one is a much larger organization based out of Chicago called the $1 Million Roundtable Foundation. I've been a member of MDRT for 23 years, and I've been raising money with them for probably most of the last 20 years. And on the 1st of September, I've moved from being a trustee to a board member. We have an endowment of $30 million. We give away $2.5 million a year to about somewhere between 170 and 250 different charities around the world. So that's a fairly onerous task, but very, very fulfilling.
When you go all around the world, do you notice many cultural differences, or how the differences in how people respond to you? How people feel? Does that change depending on where you are?
It does, and I've got many embarrassing stories as to when I've got the cultural differences completely wrong. But we'll talk about that on another occasion. I think absolutely. But that's what makes the world such an amazing place. It's why I love travel so much, because, in Japan, their cultural approach to life is entirely different to, say, the Americans, and the Indians are entirely different to the South Africans. So there is so much. I'm a great believer that travel has been my best educator, Paul, over all these years, learning about people, culture, community, food, climate. There's such a lot to be learned in the world, and I think if anyone gets the opportunity to travel and take responsibility for learning what you can, and trying also to adapt to the cultural beliefs of those people you spend time with, because all too often we Brits, we do love to kind of impose our own culture on others, whereas the locals always love it when you try to adapt to them, learn a couple of their words or a phrase, or so yeah, amazing. The world is an amazing place, full of lots of diversity, but that's what makes it so appealing to me.
Well, Sandro, I'm not surprised, but you've exceeded my expectation today. Just wonderful humanity and wonderful advice, I think. So it's almost, I'm sitting here purring, thinking, you've just made my life so much easier, because I'm just going to say to people, don't bother to ask me, just listen to the interview I did with Sandro Forte, because he just sums up all those wonderful life's lessons in such a lovely way. So in closing, what does the future hold for Sandro Forte, both personally and philanthropically, and maybe even corporately?
Philanthropically, we'll definitely continue to do everything I can to make the human race a better place to be, and for communities to thrive. Personally and professionally, I think, a bit like you, Paul, there comes a point where you commercially, you have to make some decisions. As my business has grown exponentially, there are lots of clients I absolutely adore, love working with, so I want to spend more time working with them. And I also have set myself the goal of, I speak Italian pretty well. I would like to become fluent, so need to take some time out to do that, which means spending some more time at my place in Italy. And also, I think just to go on being the best version of myself I can be, and go on helping people from a financial perspective, raise lots of money, and but also at the same time take a bit more time for me, because I've been on the hamster wheel for 31 years, and I need a bit of time out for me and the family. So that would be what the next 5 years looks like, I think.
Anyway, so we'd marginally overrun today, but I think it was worth it because I wanted Sandro to finish off his wonderful views today. So thank you, Sandro, for joining us from his home in West Yorkshire.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you ever so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you listeners really enjoyed the treat that is Sandro. The good thing about Sandro is he doesn't need to have an ice cream parlour to bring as much joy as licking that little top with a 99 on top, which I love to do on Burnham Pier most Saturdays. So thanks, Sandro. That was the Aspen Waite Radio Breakfast Show, and we'll be back tomorrow.